Genomic Emancipation, 21st of June, 2025. Section 1. Introduction. We, the free world, as a society, should decide to invest in the development of technology for human germline genomic engineering. To me, this claim speaks for itself. Who wouldn't want to massively decrease the risks of many diseases in their future children? Who wouldn't want to give their children strong and diverse capabilities like creativity, problem-solving ability, wisdom, and empathy? If so many people want this technology, doesn't it stand to reason that our scientists and entrepreneurs would be highly motivated and enabled to develop it? But, well, they aren't yet. So even though the claim speaks for itself, we have to ask, what would it look like to have a world where humanity greatly benefits from germline genomic engineering? What broader vision does reprogenetic technology fit into? Some reasons we should work out a vision. To notice major problems with the vision. To honestly persuade more people that the vision is desirable, if it is. To hold our intentions strongly, so that we are not overly discouraged by attacks, and so that we are motivated to work together towards the broader vision. In this way, we can go ahead with developing the technology at full speed, while steering away from harm and towards good worlds via planning and alertness. The rest of this article describes a vision, which I call Genomic Emancipation. The main part of this article is divided into several sections, each addressing a question asked about genomic emancipation. What, from whom, of whom, by whom, how, to where, and when, and how to uphold humanity throughout the process of emancipation. Lengthier, more peripheral elaborations are deferred to appendices. Section 2. Disclaimers. The aim of this essay is to lay down the central points of my current thinking about the broad positive motivations that should be behind reprogenetics. There is a literature on this, which I haven't reviewed rigorously, and I'm not a bioethicist, so this essay will be far from entirely novel or comprehensive. This essay only speaks for me, since the topic is complex and political. The views here are especially likely to be revised. I'd hope for more people to participate in envisioning futures that are made good by including reprogenetic technologies. Section 3. What is emancipation? The roots of the word emancipation are ex man seps, meaning something like taken away from the possessor. Ex means out. Man means hand, as in manual. Seps means taker, as in concept, together taken, cognate with capture and have. So emancipation is being taken out from the grasp of the grasper's hand. By implication, the grasper had to grasp in order to suppress whoever was grasped. They were grasped, and their potential was cut off. But their potential was there, pushing outward, and so it had to be clasped with iron in order to be cut off. When they are emancipated, they are empowered to successfully push outward, and can pursue their potential. Emancipation has two aspects, liberation and empowerment. Liberation is negative. It breaks bonds, removes constraints, opens up the door to possibilities. Empowerment is positive. It gives energy, capability, an engine, which can drive forward into those possibilities. Section 4. What is genomic emancipation? The simple meaning of genomic emancipation is making biotechnology to empower parents on behalf of their future children. The practical meaning of genomic emancipation is making it so that any parents who want to are able to freely, effectively, judiciously alter the genomic foundations they give to their future children. In other words, many parents would want to give their future children genomes that would make the children's lives better, as the parents judge it. Lives that are perhaps healthy, long, sane, and or full of the sort of thriving that is unlocked by high physical and cognitive capabilities. Genomic emancipation means making it technologically, legally, and socially feasible for those parents to do so. Genomic liberation means upholding genomic liberty. lifting undue constraints by law or social stigma on how parents are allowed to affect the genomes of their future children. Genomic empowerment means developing the science and technology of human germline genomic engineering, aka reprogenetics, and then making that technology usable by parents. Genes alone do not determine a human's destiny, nor do memes alone. Instead, genes and memes are like two legs, both jointly required for support and balance, combining to provide a strong foundation for free spirits. Alright, it's more complicated. What do you want from me? But the point is that nature and nurture both support a human becoming themselves. Therefore, both nature and nurture can be levers with which to increase the support given to a human to become themselves. The ideal that underlies genomic emancipation is the birthright of human spirits includes fuller self-unfolding via self-sovereignty over their own genomes. That ideal should be pursued precautiously and gradually, but eagerly enough for our urgent needs. See Emancipation When below. Section 5. Emancipation from whom? Whose hands are we in the grasp of? 5.1. Mother Nature. The hand that grasps our left wrist is the hand of Mother Nature, who, if we're indulging in animism, not only is the generous giver of the material of life, but also is the casually cruel matrix of illness, incapacity, decay, madness, and annihilation, which we are all more or less familiar with via our loved ones, and sooner or later are subject to ourselves, in old age if never else. No matter how much one might sigh and say, well, that's life, it will never actually be okay that a child's life is cut short, a young man goes blind, a daughter loses her father to cancer before she grows up, a cancer researcher was not gifted with as much cleverness as he would have wanted to put towards inventing a cure for the father's metastatic killer, or an old woman can no longer recognize or even remember her own son. We are not taking control of evolution, we are bidding her goodbye. Thank you for your service, you did the best you could, but we were never destined to be your possessions. From now on, we will let our ideas, rather than our children, bear the risk of withering and dying. 5.2. The lesion. The hand that grasps our right wrist is the hand of unreflectively over-conservative society at large. There is a lesion in our collective psyche around anything to do with genetics and reproduction. This lesion prevents people from appropriately deploying capital, financial, political, and human, toward the ambitious possibilities of germline engineering, except in a scattered and usually furtive manner. We cannot collectively imagine the benefits clearly, so we cannot be motivated by them. Legal prohibitions, declarations from ethics councils, academic norms for funding and hiring, and general stigma all suppress technological progress and terribly constrict what genomic modifications would be allowed if technically feasible. At the ground level, this lesion is there for good reasons. There are many perils of germline engineering technology, and a blunt force reaction against that technology is the only reaction that's easily available to society. We'll have to do some work in order to make it possible for society to choose a more precise reaction to the perils, a reaction that allows for speedy and sane development of strong reprogenetics. On the other hand, although there are good reasons for the lesion to exist, the lesion is also metastatic. People know that other people don't feel comfortable to seriously consider reprogenetics, so they themselves feel uneasy, and this behavior is thoughtlessly self-reinforcing. So that is the hand that grasps, a blinkered and blinkering aversion that pervades the halls of academic, political, and financial power. Many individuals, many academics, some scientists, and the common man on the street will say out loud the obvious, that germline engineering would be a godsend. But as a collective, we are horribly averse to seriously inclining towards the possibility. Section 6. Emancipation of whom? Recall the ideal that underlies genomic emancipation. The birthright of human spirits includes fuller self-unfolding via self-sovereignty over their own genomes. The ideal of Genomic Emancipation talks about giving human spirits more sovereignty over themselves, over their own genomes. So then why does genomic emancipation mean, in practice, empowering parents to influence the genomes of their future children? There are two reasons. Reason one, the alternative would be radical somatic/morphological emancipation. Reproductive genomic emancipation, the sort that can make lots of healthy, long-lived, brilliant people, is probably safer and more technically achievable than large effects through somatic gene editing. For example, having large effects on cognitive ability by gene editing brains is likely very difficult once childhood development has already finished, and is likely very risky. Thus, radical somatic emancipation will probably progress more slowly. Reason 2. It's impossible for a human to choose her own genome before she comes into being. Therefore, her genome must be chosen by someone or something else. It is just like with a 2-year-old. The infant isn't equipped to make a good judgment about whether it is good for him to drink a sugary alcoholic drink, and his parents should restrict that freedom on behalf of his longer-term empowerment. Given the necessity for someone or something other than the child to choose her genome, genomic emancipation says, in order to appropriately empower the future child, on balance, it would be better if much more influence were given to parents, working together with genetic counselors to understand the available genomic choices. That's because parents are, in most cases, the best available agents to steward the child into being. By and large, the parents are a better choice than blind nature, a professional committee, or a state. That's because they intrinsically care more, they will be tasked with, will invest the most in, and will be held accountable for raising the resulting child. They are humans, as opposed to an inhuman process such as a committee, and they have a transpersonal spirit stake in their child. Genomic emancipation does not mean saying to parents, okay, do whatever random thing you feel like, follow whatever whim, it's all good when it comes to genomic choices for your future kids. That is wrong moral advice. Further, it should not be how society is set up. There should be some legal restrictions as well as some professional norms for reproductive clinics which constrain parents' genomic choices. But as a matter of the change we can make to society in order to genomically emancipate future children, emancipating parents is the right choice to make today. Parents are not the rightful lords of their children's souls, but they are the rightful stewards. Emancipation by whom? What do the grant makers, the scientists, the investors and regulators and clinicians, what do they have to hear? Academics do not want to lose their funding and jobs, and do not want to overpromise. Investors and entrepreneurs don't want their ventures stymied by regulation. Regulators don't want retrospective popular outrage. They all care what society at large thinks. So, if you want parents to have the option to give their kids health and life and capability, then say so. They have to hear the rest of us saying clearly that we want genomic emancipation. Section 8. Emancipation how? On a social level, we have to decide to pursue genomic emancipation. On a technical level, there's a bunch of research that needs to be done. The fundamental technical bottleneck is the epigenomic correction problem, which is most likely to be solved via IVG, in vitro gametogenesis, making eggs or sperm from stem cells in the lab. If any funders want to robustly, significantly accelerate the field, they should invest in IVG. In particular, they should invest in a primate research center aimed at assisting with reproductive research. It might not happen otherwise due to the valley of death. Projects go unfunded if they aren't a good fit for government-funded academic research or for commercial ventures. I think the national primate research centers aren't currently up to the task. This has to happen. Here's a zoomed-out picture of the main hypothetically possible genome engineering methods. It shows qualitatively, but not with any quantitative precision, how strong each method is and how feasible it is. Embryo selection is available now, and embryo editing might be available soon, but these are both fairly limited. Stronger methods include stem cell editing, chromosome selection, iterated meiotic selection, and whole genome synthesis, but most likely these all require in vitro gametogenesis in order to make healthy human babies with modified genomes. The appendix, The Ramp-Up of Reprogenetic Strength, gives a brief sketch of how the development of reprogenetics might go. For more technical information, see Visual Roadmap to Strong Human Germline Engineering, which is an interactive version of this zoomed-out research roadmap. For much more technical information, see Methods for Strong Human Germline Engineering. Section 9. Emancipation to where? Where are we going? If we're genomically emancipated, what happens? And what do we want to happen? 9.1. The bush. To a great extent, where we are going should remain an open question. The burning bush tells Moshe to go free his people, the bush's people, from Egypt. And Moshe says, okay, and just who exactly, might I ask, should I tell the Israelites is coming out of the blue to save them, that they should up and leave all of a sudden? The bush says, a bit ambiguously, something like, I will be as I will be. But make no mistake, that was a direct answer to Moshe's question. The bush doubles down, saying, no, seriously though, that's what you tell them. Just tell them I will be is coming to save you. That's my name, Mr. Being, and I'm sticking to that. That's going to be my name literally forever. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. What is the meaning of this? The bush, aka God, is saying, it's an open question, sort of, or a work in progress. What I will be has to be determined through our collective alive unfolding. It's not something we can delimit or comprehend finally in advance. Do not be deceived by the obliqueness and abstraction of this answer. God is not floofy or malleable or insubstantial. The bush burns, it lives, but it is not consumed. It is the ner tamid. And to be eternal, it has to have an eternal integrity. Humanity should self-transform, continually, but cautiously and gradually, openly and without premature definition, but in a way that upholds and strengthens our core humanness. In other words, we cannot and should not say in advance exactly how we should apply reprogenetic technologies. To a great extent, that question is up to our future selves to figure out ongoingly. 9.2. Expansion. While broadly leaving the future open, I will name a few features of the future that I'd hope to see. The overall theme is, cautiously and gradually, expanding humanity into more ways of well-being. We don't want to expand strictly all variation. In fact, probably the collective sum of our autonomous genomic choices would decrease a lot of variation, namely variation in how much do I have this disease. We currently have a wide variety of diseases that maim us, both literally and also figuratively, cutting off big chunks of the network of possibilities for life that would have otherwise been available to us. It would not be bad if we went from the great variation of lots of people have diabetes and lots don't, most people don't have Huntington's, but some do, lots of people get Alzheimer's, some don't, to the much more uniform world of very few people are forced by their genes to get diabetes, very few forced to get Huntington's, very few forced to get Alzheimer's. On the other hand, variation in our capacities is obviously good. Let there be an even richer and more widespread range of human capacity. Let there be a profusion of brilliant athletes, artists, scientists, empaths, leaders ad astra. So we have a picture of decreasing variation in some ways and increasing in other ways. I would also hope for a greater variation in traits that are neither obviously desirable nor obviously undesirable, even if they're controversial. For example, consider personality traits. Many personality traits have trade-offs for each phenotype. For many traits, there's no obviously better direction or phenotype. In many cases, groups of humans benefit from having a diverse set of phenotypes in order to fill a variety of social niches. And many people have differing opinions or desires for their children regarding various traits. I would hope that fewer children will be burdened with pathological extremes of personality, while many non-pathological but less common phenotypes become somewhat more common. Children should not be forced by random rolls of the genetic dice to be schizophrenic or dysfunctionally autistic. On the other hand, more children should have the potential opportunity to be a brilliant mathematician, a wise thinker, an inspiring leader, or an artistic genius. Note that this depiction is only aspirational. Personality traits in general, and specifically their genomic influences, are not currently well understood. 9.3. Intelligence. What about intelligence? Are we going to homogenize, collapsing into one kind of intelligence that's easiest to target with germline engineering? Are we going to create two types of people, the haves, who all have some high level of intelligence, and then the haven'ts, who haven't that level? On the contrary, here is what I picture happening to humanity's distribution of cognitive capabilities as we start using reprogenetics. On the left, the current distribution of cognitive capacities is schematically represented. Each axis abstractly represents some cognitive capacity, such as verbal IQ or spatial IQ, or performance on some test, or potential ability to make scientific progress, or potential ability to write moving poetry. Since cognitive abilities are pretty strongly correlated with each other, the distribution is mostly clustered along the gray line, which represents IQ. On the right is a hypothetical possible future that could result once many parents have had the opportunity to use reprogenetic technologies. In this possible future, we don't have more homogeneity, more inequality, or a two-class system. Rather, anyone who wants is uplifted in terms of overall cognitive capacities. We'll begin to do away with the deeply unfair, somewhat linear scale of generally weaker or generally stronger cognitive capacities. We'll become less constrained by genetic noise. Instead, over time, we'll be more constrained by the upper limits of human biology and feasible reprogenetics, represented by the second perpendicular gray line. Far from segregating into two classes, we will spread out into a wider variety of special brilliant minds. 9.4. Equal opportunity. In general, it's unfair that some people are in practice doomed to a life with incapacity, pointless suffering, or premature death. Genomic emancipation would go a long way toward correcting this unfairness. Section 10. Emancipation when? Should we be more intently pursuing genomic emancipation now rather than later? The following subsections present considerations in favor of emancipation now. This focus isn't because there aren't many conceivable risks. See potential perils of germline genomic engineering. However, in my actual expectations and plans for genomic engineering, most of the largest considerations land in favor, so I will not pretend otherwise. And anyway, here in this essay I want to sketch some parts of the case in favor. 10.1. The urgent need for health. Don't forget the basic fact that genomic emancipation would enable parents to give their children a greatly reduced risk of many diseases and mental illnesses. Every day that genomic emancipation is delayed, it is as though thousands of people worldwide have, avoidably, been given diseases ranging from breast cancer and coronary artery disease to cystic fibrosis and schizophrenia. 10.2. The urgent need for human capacity. The rapid and accelerating change in global human society makes an urgent demand for more human capacity. We need more brilliant, clever, sane, wise, empathetic humans to navigate the threat of artificial general intelligence, political turmoil, cultural and epistemological disintegration, climate change, novel destructive technologies, and unforeseen threats. Artificial general intelligence, in particular, is not a freight train, but a maglev bullet train hurtling towards us at an unknown, fast speed from an unknown distance. 10.3. Safety, efficacy, and societal consent. There are open questions and problems around how to make germline engineering technologies safe and effective, and about whether we are collectively on board with using the technologies. The statement emancipation now doesn't mean we should ignore these problems. Rather, it means we should be investing much more in addressing these problems as part and parcel of developing germline engineering technologies. Safety hasn't been demonstrated yet is a good reason to not try to actually make a human baby using the unvalidated technology. But often, safety hasn't been demonstrated yet is used as a reason to not pursue the safe version of the technology. This makes little sense. There's some instrumental relevance. If safety hasn't been demonstrated, maybe it will be difficult to demonstrate, so the cost of making the safe version will be higher, so it's on balance a less promising investment. But this is a fairly weak reason, given the enormous benefits of genomic emancipation. And more importantly, it's not at all a reason to not run the calculation of whether it's a good investment. Likewise, for efficacy hasn't been demonstrated yet. And likewise, for society hasn't consented yet. That's potentially a very good reason to not go full steam ahead with applying the technology, but it's not a good reason to not develop the prerequisite science, and it's literally the opposite of a good reason to not have the conversation about applying the technology. If we're not even having the conversation about applying the technology, it's not reasonable to expect efforts toward genomic emancipation to wait on hold forever. 10.4. Genomic engineering overhang. Many of the potential perils of genomic emancipation come from shocks to society. The problems come from transitions rather than from stable states. In general, the shock is lessened if we start getting feedback sooner rather than later. We can see what happens when we apply the relatively weaker versions of germline engineering technology. There's some current ambient level of our knowledge about stem cell manipulation, DNA manipulation, genomic data, psychometrics, and polygenic scores. If we wait until that level is quite high before we start applying reprogenetics very much, there will be a capability overhang. Then the overhang will all fall at once when someone does decide to go ahead with applying reprogenetics. Instead, we should continually take small steps forward to increase the range of the applications that we're trying out and keep our eyes open for problems. In that way, we can take our growing pains one at a time. As long as there is a capability overhang in genomic engineering, the wealthy and powerful people who can circumvent boundaries will be getting a head start over the rest of us for reaping the benefits of these technologies. As long as there is a capability overhang, it will be possible for some people to pursue it in defiance of society's stance. The only people who pursue it will be the sort of person who would defy society's stance. They will be selected to be somewhat uncommonly reckless or unethical. They might be pressured into relative secrecy, or even into lying about the results of their experiments. For the next few decades at least, the technology will be quite impactful in some areas, but will not be a world-melting change. We'll be able to decrease disease risks, increase lifespan and health span, increase IQ, and maybe nudge a few personality traits. We won't be able to make children who are non-human, inhuman, or superhuman. So we are on fairly safe ground to take steps forward for the time being. 10.5. The Internet and Human Destiny. We've had the Internet for a few decades. Besides the great benefits, in that time we've also encountered several major issues. Personal data or infrastructure getting hacked, dark markets for immoral things, addictive media, loss of attention span, political polarization, and so on. Now, does this make us want to have never invented the Internet in the first place, or to have delayed its invention? It doesn't make me want that. To me, the Internet is, in an important sense, part of the destiny of humanity. It's a more or less necessary step along our path as a global community. Humanity was always going to become much more connected. We were always going to process and share information at scale. If we were always going to become more connected, then as a necessary consequence, we were always going to be required, at some point, to figure out how to cope with the anxiety-inducing, spaciousness-deflating pressure to participate in the high-frequency, high-consensus global conversation. That is a problem that lies inevitably on our path of more connection, of more collective consciousness. Likewise, if we were always going to share information at scale, then we were always going to be exposed to the most viral memes, including false and destructive memes. We were always going to suffer from massive correlated failures of huge numbers of agents who are copying each other's beliefs. The same applies to genomic emancipation. Our destiny is in the stars, and our destiny is radical self-unfolding via self-sovereignty. Making choices about our genomes is a step on that path. As Professor Hank Greeley points out, all we've been doing since we came down from the trees is enhancing ourselves and overcoming nature's cruelties through our own artifice. So, if genomic emancipation means that parents and doctors will have to make difficult choices, that's on the way to our destiny. Increasing self-sovereignty implies more responsibility and more difficult choices. If genomic emancipation implies that what it means to be human will begin to be called into question, that's on the way to our destiny as well. Increasing self-sovereignty implies more and deeper changes to oneself. It implies self-sovereignty over ourselves as humans in general, including the possibility of stepping outside our own humanity. Not just self-sovereignty over ourselves as people who fit within the mold of what humans have already been. Now, it will indeed be a major problem for us when we are required to decide which aspects of ourselves are or are not fundamental. It will be a major problem, but it's not a contingent problem. If you trip and break your leg because of some strangely shaped concrete protrusion of the sidewalk, that is a contingent problem. It's perfectly coherent to imagine a world without the protrusion and in which you didn't trip, but where you are still basically the same person in all the ways that matter. Nothing about who you are and who you want to become requires that there be a sidewalk protrusion to trip you. On the other hand, we are required by our nature as self-transforming souls to face the problem of what aspects of ourselves are fundamental to who we are and who we want to be. It's a problem that we will want to undertake sooner or later, ideally later. Of course, none of this means that we should sit back and let bad stuff happen as a result of the internet or as a result of genomic emancipation, just because the problems are allegedly inevitable. What's inevitable is that we'll be faced with these problems, and we are supposed to actively preempt them or solve them. Thus, insofar as a peril caused by genomic emancipation is actually part of our destiny, it shouldn't be simply counted as a point against emancipation. The question is not about whether or not to create the problem for ourselves. The question is when and how to face the problem. 10.6. Heal what's in front of you. The world is complicated, so what do? According to a folk tale, something happens when Pharaoh's army is bearing down on the Israelites on the shore of the Sea of Reeds, aiming to unemancipate them. One of the Israelites, a man by the name of Nachshon, panics and runs into the sea. Having been held his whole life as a slave in only sand and mud, Nachshon doesn't know how to swim, and promptly proceeds to start drowning. Meanwhile, Moshe is freaking out because of the whole slave army thing. God, their chariots approach. What can I do to save the people of Israel? Cries Moshe. So God says, Moshe, just breathe for a second. First things first. One of your people is drowning. Save Nachshon, and then we'll deal with Pharaoh. To give Nachshon something to hold on to, Moshe sticks his staff of heavenly power into the waters of the Sea of Reeds, which, apparently, causes the sea to split in two, opening a way for the Israelites to escape. So the point is that you don't have to solve everything in advance. If there's a thing that seems concretely good to do, if it seems that it will likely be of great help in service of something that really matters, and there's no strong reason not to do it, then it's good to start doing that thing. You keep your eyes out for problems and your ears open for warnings, but you don't stop in your tracks. It's hard to foresee even all of the most important consequences of genomic emancipation, but I don't think that's enough to say we shouldn't proceed. We have to exercise precautionary foresight and make the technology safe and keep our eyes open, and there will be problems that we will have to address in the future when we find out about them. But if the straightforward effects of developing reprogenetic technology look overwhelmingly desirable, we should proceed with conviction and at speed. Section 11. Buttressing emancipated humanity. In the longer run, where are we going with genomic emancipation? Does humanity collapse or what? We will have to work out buttresses to hold up our collectivity in the face of the new forces that will be at play after genomic emancipation. 11.1. The infinite game. God tells Moshe to relay God's message to Pharaoh. The message is famous as, "Let my people go." But this is a paraphrase. What God actually says is usually translated as, "Let my people go so that they may worship me." My hyperliteral rendering would instead be, "Send my nation, and they will work for me." Shlach et ami v'yavduni. I don't advocate for an emancipation that entails a total disintegration of humanity as a collectivity, as a unified perspective, a community, a sovereignty, a grand project. Rather, we're to be emancipated in order to work for God. I see most of my readers balking at that statement. Fair enough. Let's rephrase. We're to be emancipated in order to participate in this. Humanity as an ideal collective of human spirits, what we will be, believe, and value when we've grown up much further together while relating to each other in a radical way, i.e., in a way that holds a vast space open for both diverse autonomous spirits and for strong and deep reconciliation between those spirits. In order to participate in that, we'll need some restraint to keep the infinite game going. Enough restraint to avoid outcomes like collapsing under competitive or short-sighted modification, tyranny of the parents or tyrannizing of the children, abandoning children, the disintegration of humanity, tyranny of one generation, or loss of intrinsic care for children. But not so much restraint that we cut off genuine possibilities for humans or humanity. 11.2. Growing pains. Recall what happened to Gertrude McFuzz. Lalalilu's invidious tale stimulates McFuzz to seek biomedical enhancement, which works. All too well. We'll have to learn to not make choices that materially harm our children in order to advantage them within zero-sum competitions, or for some gain that is superficial or selfish. If we don't learn to do this, we'll have to coordinate, socially or even legislatively, to restrict choices such as making your son 7 feet tall. 11.3. Habermas and multi-generational feedback. A core element of genomic emancipation is that we are emancipating the children. Parents are given most of the decision-making authority, but insofar as we're able to actually listen to the children, they have the ultimate authority. Suppose some genomic choice creates children who then later decry that choice. They may say, for example, that the choice caused them great suffering, or that it needlessly cut off some life path that they would have wanted to pursue, or that it greatly diminished their flourishing. In this case, these children are the best available people to speak on behalf of the possible future children whose parents might make that same genomic choice for them. So probably in most of these cases, we should restrict that genomic choice. A key restriction to enable multi-generational feedback. It is prohibited to make genomic choices for a child that would severely silence that child. See permanent silencing. We'd aim, in this way, to not have children be perpetually abandoned or perpetually tyrannized by genomic choices made for them. In The Future of Human Nature, 2003, Jürgen Habermas argues that germline engineering would create a new and deleteriously asymmetric relationship between parent and child. Genomic choices supposedly subjugate the child to the parent's will and whim in a more irreversible way than child-rearing choices, because the child can later retrospectively reclaim agency over their own lived history, but supposedly not over their genomes. By giving voice to all children in humanity's multi-generational self-transformation, we give children their ability to also reclaim even their own genomic foundations as part of their agency, by taking sovereignty over the next iteration of those genomic choices. This is why reprogenetics must always come with a commitment to the child's right to eventually be informed of what genomic choices his parents made about him. 11.4. Fukuyama and Human Dignity. In Our Post-Human Future, 2002, Francis Fukuyama argues that modifying humans using biotechnology, including germline engineering, could threaten human dignity. Human dignity is a status afforded to all humans equally, which grants them human rights, and which, if threatened, could destabilize or destroy fundamental social coordination structures. For Fukuyama, human dignity isn't just a political category that could be assigned to anything, such as a carrot or a penguin. Rather, it's a pure status based on specific features of humans as agents, giving rise to some quality of humans called factor X. Quoting Fukuyama, "Factor X cannot be reduced to the possession of moral choice, or reason, or language, or sociability, or sentience, or emotions, or consciousness, or any other quality that has been put forth as a ground for human dignity. It is all of these qualities coming together in a human whole that makes up factor X." I agree with this argument. For the foreseeable future, we should not try to make it technically feasible to remove fundamental universal human features. And if that became possible, we shouldn't do it, and we should maybe ban doing it. Beyond political matters, there is a spiritual issue. We don't want to delete our humanity. We do want to self-transform, but we want to do so in a way that is directed by the extant faculty of human judgment that each of us has. If we delete core parts of that faculty of humane judgment, then we no longer have that faculty available. So we can't use our humane judgment to notice and rectify the mistake we made by breaking our humane judgment. We'll never get back together our thromboembulator. However, as noted previously, such radical modifications are unlikely to be feasible in the near future. The genomic choices that are likely to be available soon do not threaten human nature or human dignity. 11.5. C.S. Lewis and the Tyranny of One Generation. In the eponymous third essay of The Abolition of Man, 1943, C.S. Lewis argues that man's conquest of nature continually empowers us, up until, in the final conquest of nature, one generation will radically disempower all future generations. Through genetic and mimetic control, that generation, the conditioners, will, according to their whims and without concern for transgenerational spirit, shape human nature in a complete and final way. By fully subordinating the fundamentals of humanness to their own somatic whims, they give their whims free and inhumane rein to trash or delete humanity. Thus, they effectively abolish man, leaving only their own artifice. For Lewis, the liberation of one generation is also a disempowering of the previous generations, and the empowering of one generation is also an unliberation of subsequent generations. The liberation of one generation means breaking or stepping outside of the Tao, discarding whatever of humanity is supposed to be transgenerational. He writes, "What motive is to impel the conditioners to scorn delights and live laborious days, in order that we, and posterity, may have what we like? Their duty? But that is only the Tao, which they may decide to impose on us, but which cannot be valid for them. If they accept it, then they are no longer the makers of conscience, but still its subjects, and their final conquest over nature has not really happened. The preservation of the species? But why should the species be preserved? One of the questions before them is whether this feeling for posterity, they know well how it is produced, shall be continued or not. However far they go back or down, they can find no ground to stand on. Every motive they try to act on becomes at once a petitio. It is not that they are bad men. They are not men at all. Stepping outside the Tao, they have stepped into the void. Nor are their subjects necessarily unhappy men. They are not men at all. They are artifacts. Man's final conquest has proved to be the abolition of man. Indeed, we should not fully conquer nature in the sense of breaking all continuity with our history and discarding all values or ways of thinking and being that come from our past. Genomic emancipation doesn't imply doing so. But empowerment, contra what Lewis seems to suggest, is not zero-sum. To fulfill our values, we want to liberate and empower our children. We can use our emancipation to further their emancipation. Our transgenerational values point through our children. We don't really want our children to follow some specific life plan, like being a historian of blueberry cultivation or a tax attorney specializing in multinationals. We want more open-ended things for our children. We want that they should pursue what deeply matters to them, and we do not, cannot, should not control or even know in advance what those pursuits will be. Another point. Humanity is not so easy to tame. African slaves in America were subjected to a sustained assault on their humanity and pride in a way that one might have expected to break them, or even to genetically select out agency and resistance. But a great many freed slaves not only welcomed freedom, but went back to fight in the Civil War. The Jews, having been brutally persecuted for 1,000 years in 1,000 lands, returned to Eretz Yisrael and built a world-renowned defense force. Can't stop the signal, Mal. Lewis's conditioners are probably only science fiction for the foreseeable future. Since humans are free spirits at their original core, you'll have a pretty tough time engineering them to be permanently canalized. And for a trait that is highly polygenic and or non-genetically determined, we won't be able to greatly decrease the variance in that trait anytime soon. 11.6. Sandel, May, Heidegger, The Giftedness of Being. In The Case Against Perfection, 2009, Michael Sandel argues that applying reprogenetics would erode our sense of the giftedness of life, that life is a gift to be cherished, not something to be mastered. The most compelling element of his argument about giftedness is his discussion of parental love. He says that parents bent on enhancing their children are more likely to overreach, to express and entrench attitudes at odds with the norm of unconditional love. Sandel quotes the theologian William May on the tension between love that accepts and love that transforms. Parents find it difficult to maintain an equilibrium between the two sides of love. Accepting love, without transforming love, slides into indulgence and finally neglect. Transforming love, without accepting love, badgers and finally rejects. Sandel judges that reprogenetics would fall on the side of transforming love without accepting love, like SAT prep courses and an over-profusion of lessons and tutors. The hyper-parenting familiar in our time represents an anxious excess of mastery and dominion that misses the sense of life as gift. Later, Sandel clarifies the connection between viewing life as a gift and unconditional parental love. Whatever its effect on the autonomy of the child, the drive to banish contingency and to master the mystery of birth diminishes the designing parent and corrupts parenting as a social practice governed by the norms of unconditional love. Why does the mystery of birth matter? From a 2002 discussion between May, Sandel, Fukuyama, and others in the President's Council on Bioethics, Sandel paraphrases May, saying that a key element of viewing life as a gift is an openness to the unbidden and the unelected. That's Sandel's point. If parents are exercising their desire to shape their future child, they are diminishing their commitment to love and care for her, whoever she may turn out to be. They are making their child something to be molded and mastered, rather than someone to be appreciated as they are. Parents are supposed to be open to the unbidden, open to relating to whoever comes, outside of their control. This rhymes with Heidegger's argument from 1954 in his essay The Question Concerning Technology. He takes modern technology to be not a set of apparatuses and methods, but rather a way of relating to the world. He argues that our way of relating to the world, in a technological mindset, involves aggressively pigeonholing everything, the natural world, the constructed world, and ourselves, as a resource, as something to be exchanged, commanded, and deployed as potential means to some end. Heidegger points to a consequence of this attitude. Modern technology, as a way of relating to the world, excludes other important ways of relating to the world. We are in danger of losing, for example, meditative or poetic ways of relating to the world that let things reveal themselves to us, And so, furthermore, we're in danger of losing the constellation of these different modes and the creative tension between them. We can apply Heidegger's argument to reprogenetics, rhyming with Sandel's argument. The parents are in danger of impoverishing themselves in terms of how they relate to their child. They might lose the ways of being with their child that let the child reveal his being, and that let them have his being revealed to them. I draw the following lesson from this idea of openness to the unbidden. While using reprogenetics, parents should keep firmly in mind that this is a child. But that is the most obvious thing in the world, I hear you say. Yes, but still. This is a child, and she will be messy and surprising. He's mysterious. She'll exert her free will. He won't necessarily fit into your plans. She won't necessarily look like you thought, even if you used reprogenetics. He might have quirky ways of thinking. This is your child to love. You can't control everything about the environment. You can't control random developmental events. You can't control most genes relevant to a trait. And you can't control most traits. Most of all, you can't and shouldn't control your child's free will and self-sovereign self-creation. Your child is a mystery, just with some traits nudged around a bit, probabilistically. This is why we don't call them super babies, CRISPR babies, designer babies, etc. They are babies simpliciter. You may be paying money and putting a bunch of thought, and even fight and sacrifice, into making genomic choices for your children. That is right and noble. But the child's life isn't about that. The child isn't a product that you're paying for. Once your genomic choices have been made, it's your job to care about the whole child, without particular emphasis on traits related to your genomic choices. The child's life isn't about the traits you were thinking about in the reprogenetics clinic. It's about whatever life the child creates. That is, whatever life she co-creates with you and her family and her friends. Finally, parents should, morally speaking, use reprogenetics to increase the mystery of birth. That is, parents should increase their future child's capability to think, solve problems, pursue aims, and self-create. By empowering their child, the parents make him more of a mystery, more of a surprise. Section 12. Palin synopsis. What is emancipation? Liberation and empowerment. What is genomic emancipation? Empowering parents to make genomic choices on behalf of their future children. Emancipation from whom? From Mother Nature, who thoughtlessly and pointlessly disempowers our children by forcing upon them illness and diminished capacity. And from the lesion, which thoughtlessly and pointlessly forces us to go at 10th speed in our pursuit of empowerment for our children. Emancipation of whom? Of future children, and of parents who are their best available stewards. Emancipation by whom? By us, by society. Emancipation how? By making that decision as a society, and through the science and biotechnology of reprogenetics. By funding a primate research lab focused on reproduction. Emancipation to where? To wherever we will decide to go as we learn more. To a world where more people are enabled to pursue their desires with vigor. Emancipation when? Emancipation now, to address our urgent needs for health and capacity, and as there is no strong reason we shouldn't go ahead now, carefully but rapidly. Buttressing emancipated humanity, by maintaining the collective game through which our humane spirits will unfold together. Section 13. Conclusion. We, the free world, as a society, should decide to invest in the development of technology for human germline genomic engineering. All right, that's the essay. There's a bunch of appendices with more elaboration if you want to check that out. So let's see if doesn't seem like we have questions, but I'll just make sure. All right, I'll close the stream, but I'll just say that I want to, I want to have more conversations about this. So, if you're curious about how to advance reprogenetics, or you have concerns or questions, or you want to debate or discuss and figure out, whether it's good or how it can be good or bad, I would love to chat. So you can reach out to me at berkeleygenomicsproject at gmail.com, or svbtcontact at gmail.com, or you can reach out on Less Wrong or Twitter. Hope to talk to you soon. Hope you enjoyed the reading of Genomic Emancipation.